bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs, we got bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs, we got bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs.
Bows and TKOs. We are live. Episode 72 coming at you from me new casa. First time home buyer. Cheers to that, man. I did not think that would be happening. Regardless, I'm your host, Shane Gillette, for this weekly MMA podcast, streaming anywhere you get your podcast videos on YouTube. Like I said, I just moved in, bought a house on the other side of the valley here in Arizona. The weather's phenomenal, but golly, has this been a project if you've ever moved before. About an hour from my previous house, did it all by myself, did hire movers, don't have the nice Antelope Canyon in the background because that is a two-person project and have not got to it. But I wanted to give you guys MMA content, although it is a little late, so that we could keep the podcast rolling because your boy's dedicated to doing so. And of course, I'm watching the fights each and every weekend. But again, little sentiment moment here. If you would have told me by 32 years old I would be a first-time home buyer and have such a beautiful place in a beautiful state that I had never really traveled before up until about 4 years ago on a vacation here, I would be mind blown. So feeling very grateful, feeling blessed. Hopefully everybody tuning in can be grateful and blessed in their own ways. Cheers to you. If you're a good friend of mine, please come visit. Door's always open. Would love to have you. I just set up my little outdoor covered patio with the mounted TV. Got the outside set up because it's about to be amazingly beautiful from November to April here. And I'll be outside a lot of the time. Enough about me because that's all I've really been doing. 2 weeks constantly cleaning my own house, packing it up, moving it in here, getting the house set up, and working on my new job. Your boy's been busy, but let's talk about what you came for, and that's mixed martial arts. On today's episode, we have fights that have been announced. We are recapping the ADXC event and Fury Grappling, previewing that's coming up. We had UFC 308, one hell of a card that was, and then we are previewing UFC Montreal back in Canada this weekend, or not Montreal, in Edmonton. So we'll jump right in. Some fights that have been announced. We have James Lallentop taking on Mauricio Ruffy November 16th. Seeing another major stud from the Fighting Nerds back in action. We have Drakkar Klose taking on Joel Alvarez December 14th. That is a certified banger for the fans in Northern Florida and Tampa Bay. We have Said Nurmagomedov taking on Daniel Marcos on that card. Sean Woodson, Fernando Padilla. And then a really big announcement, and Ian Machado Gary taking on Joaquin Buckley, as well as Michael Johnson and Otman Azaitar. So quite a card being built there in Tampa on December 14th before the holidays. And I believe that's the last card for the year for the UFC. We have Abdul Razak Al Hassan taking on Cesar Almeida January 11th. And then the first fight announced for UFC 311, Carol Hossa, Eileen Perez. That'll take place January 18th. And then we have Johnny Walker and Bogdan Guskov and Zachary Reese and Cedricus Dumas. And a fun one in the bantamweight division, Peyton Talbot and Yoni Barcelos. So UFC 311 already getting built up for January. In February, we have Ikram Aliskerov and Andre Muniz, and Sergey Pavlovich and Jairzinho Rosenstrike. So quite a few fights that have been announced since the last episode. I'm excited for that Tampa Bay card. It's been a while since we've seen Said in the octagon. That Drakkar Klose Joel Alvarez is probably the best fight on here besides maybe Ian Gary and Joaquin Buckley. But outside of that, some bad news. That's the way the UFC works. We have Bilal out of his title fight against Khamzat due to a toe injury. Brutal to see that happening. Not Kamzat, Shavkat Rakhmonov. And then we have supposed news that Saeed Nurmagomedov might not make that fight against Daniel Marcos, and that Adrian Yanez will be going in. So Saeed may not be fighting, not official yet, to be determined. But we've been pretty grateful in a lot of these pay-per-views, not any major fights pulling out, but this is the nature of the sport. Also, we had Jessica Penne, Tamirez Vidal, Vinicius Salvador, Matheus Nicolau, Robelis de Spain, and Jesse Butler cut and removed from the UFC roster. No surprise, maybe besides Matheus Nicolau, who had potential in the UFC, and a guy that I was really excited about to start, probably prematurely. I like to credit myself when you see an athlete with the potential, and I make a prediction that they'll be a future champion. I've done pretty well in that department, but I was completely off with Vinicius Salvador. He is young. I'm sure there's potential to come back. But also we had ADXC on Saturday early. We had Jussier Formiga with unanimous decision over Tagir Ulanbekov. This is no-gi grappling. So props to Formiga, Tagir Ulanbekov, pretty solid in that department. Formiga even better. Bellator alum Patchy Mix with the unanimous decision over Kairat Akhmetov. And then Rogerio Bontorin with a split decision victory over Muhammad Makayev, who's supposed to be the grappling king. An ex-UFCer beating him as well. On November 11th, we have Fury Grappling at 11 a.m. Pacific that it was announced. We have some interesting UFC blood in here. Dennis Bazooka taking on Christian Bobby. We have Peter Fazekas taking on Joe Selecki, and Herbert Burns versus Pat Sabatini. Most of the fights are 6-minute rounds. The main event, Herbert and Pat, will be 8-minute rounds plus overtime. Really interested to see jiu-jitsu versus wrestling in the Burns Sabatini, and Joe Selecki and Dennis, how they can handle the grappling department. But let's talk about a massive UFC 308 card. Although it was massive, although it delivered, I took some chances, and your boy got beat up on picks like I really maybe have once this year. I only went 5-7 on the picks, 5 wins, 7 losses. Overall, for Bows and TKOs, 72 episodes deep. I'm 432 wins, 224 losses, 7 no contests or draws. And on the year, 239 wins, 139 losses, 4 no contests or draws. So to recap this card, I thought besides the RDA knee injury, which was brutal, was actually really excited for that fight. And we didn't get to see much in that fight. The card overall was absolutely phenomenal. I thought this was one of the better quality cards of the year. And I went back and was like, does this compare to 299, 300? Is it in that ballpark? I'd actually rank 299 just a hair above this card and then 300. But UFC 308 had all the storylines. We had Ilya, Kamzat continuing to show you what they're capable of. Absolute stardom. We had some awesome decision wars. You know, I'm not necessarily a fan of early finishes because I want to see the fight play out. I love some of those decision wars as long as they're wars. And just beautiful, brilliant displays of mixed martial arts skills. The fans were late to the party there in Abu Dhabi. They have been showing up and showing out. But I guess, you know, they've had so many cards, they're just waiting for the big names. So they were a little late to their seats. But a very memorable, memorable card. Great main card. I am giving this a recap 9 out of 10. I think I previewed it maybe an 8 or 7 out of 10. But damn, this was one hell of a card. This is actually happening while I had movers come and move stuff. I got to watch 2 or 3 fights before the movers came, and I was kind of watching and helping and directing traffic. So I definitely had to go back and watch some of these. But we had Renat Fakhretdinov with unanimous decision over Carlos Leal. And this was a fight that I actually got right, but is not necessarily one I agree with. This fight was an absolute war. Again, I do not agree with the decision. I personally thought Carlos won round 1 and 2. And he was clearly landing the better strikes, had more volume throughout the fight. Round 3, I would say, was a toss-up. I do see how they could have gave that round to Renat. Renat got a takedown in round 1 and round 2, so maybe one of those takedowns was enough to sway one of the judges. But when it came to striking, Leal was winning the exchanges. He was doing more damage throughout each and every round. You do have to credit Carlos as well for the takedown defense. Renat continually was going to the grappling well and was not getting takedowns successfully. And then after being rocked and worked on the feet, Renat kind of gassed himself out trying to get those takedowns. Plus, Leal was landing a lot of beautiful leg kicks that were just chopping up Renat's leg early. I wish he would have continued that throughout the fight. But even when Renat did get a takedown, he didn't really control Leal like he does a lot of his other opponents. You have to credit Carlos for getting up, making him fight. There wasn't extended periods of top control time, and that's another big reason why I thought Carlos was the deserved winner. Some of these foreign countries, it's always a little shaky, especially when you get a foreign fighter. Leal from Brazil, Renat, I'm not sure where he's from, but he definitely had a big excitement towards him in Abu Dhabi. Let's see, Renat is from Russia, the Soviet Union. And it always seems like there's a couple odd decisions when you're fighting those types of guys. You never know. And I thought that was this case. I thought Leal, where he's been in his career coming from Bellator, put on one hell of a performance and deserved that win. You hate to see it. Statistically, the stats tell a little bit of a story too. Renat landed 119 total strikes, 109 of them significant. He had only 2 takedowns in 19 attempts and 3 minutes and 14 seconds of control time. Carlos landed 146 total, so 27 more, and 107 of those significant with 1 takedown and 4 attempts. I'm not sure how Renat had 2 more classified significant strikes. I would say Carlos definitely had quite a bit more, but the stats are sometimes misleading. But Renat extends his winning streak to 22. He did have a draw in there, but he's a nice 5-0 in the UFC. And Carlos ends his 2-fight winning streak, starts a new losing streak in his UFC debut. So what's next? Well, I think Renat needs to step up in competition. And with his winning streak, there's been a lot of controversial decisions in those wins, and I've usually picked him. But, I'll be honest with you, that he's had some very close wins that shouldn't have gone his way. So I would like to see him take a fight with Stephen Thompson, another veteran. I think that would be worthy of a fun fight, and I think Stephen would be pumped for that. And for Carlos, he could fight Nico Price. Moving on to another fight I got correct, started off good. We had Farid Basharat with a unanimous decision over Victor Hugo. And this fight was really lucky to happen because Victor didn't even try to cut to the bantamweight limit. He cut out like 10 pounds over. He was basically weighed in at featherweight. And, Farid being the trooper that he is, if your opponent decides not to make weight the morning of the weigh-ins, and you could take a chance that the UFC might pay you show money. But if you're confident you could win, you get show and win money. If you accept the fight, 10-pound weight advantage. I mean, there's a lot of sketchy things in there. But Farid's an absolute dog, him and his brother Javid. So he took the fight. And as expected, Farid was pretty pissed off in interviews that he had and the body language throughout the fight. But Farid was just the cleaner striker here. He has more options and more tools in his bag in MMA to control the fight and find a way to secure victory. That was on full display. Now, rounds 1 and 2 was Victor defending a lot of takedowns from Farid, but Farid really getting his hands going. His boxing and movement was crisp. And Victor had a few moments with some big shots landed late in round 2, early in round 3. But other than that, he was pretty much dominated. And in round 3, Farid coasted to victory with the takedown and top control. Another beautiful win by Farid Basharat. And Victor was tough. He's well-rounded. He's a pretty solid fighter. 10-pound weight advantage wasn't enough. Statistically, Farid landed 89 total strikes, 60 of them significant. He got 4 takedowns in 7 attempts, and 4 minutes and 37 seconds of control time. Now, Victor landed 48 total strikes, 45 of them significant, and he had 1 takedown in 4 attempts, about 25%, and a submission attempt. So you can see Farid almost doubled the volume and had a lot of control time and takedown success. So Farid stays undefeated. He extends his winning streak to 13. We got Farid with a 13-fight winning streak. Renat Fakhretdinov at 22. A lot of undefeateds keeping that 0. He's 5-0 in the UFC as well. Victor ends his 14-fight winning streak, starts a new losing streak. He is 2-1 in the UFC. So what's next? Well, give us Farid and Vinicius Oliveira. The UFC doesn't always make this happen, but 2 young stud prospects, lots of hype, lots of, proving to still be made. But a winner here gets a shot up into the top 15. The loser has to work his way through, but they're still young. And I think stylistically, that's such a win-win for the fans. And then for Victor, I do think he needs to fight at featherweight. So how about Pat Sabatini? Moving on, another fight that I did pick correctly. We had Kennedy and Shekaku with a round 1 TKO over Chris Barnett. And to be honest, we really didn't get to enjoy this fight. I was really excited for Chris to fight a couple weeks ago in his long-awaited return. Now he takes one of the bigger guys in the heavyweight division, new to the heavyweight division. And Chris has not fought in 2 years because he was recovering from an Achilles injury. He had to reschedule the previous fight because of the hurricane. He couldn't get out and travel. And he seemed to potentially even re-injure his Achilles on like that. They say, Chris Barnett, and he jumps up, gets hyped. I think he landed kind of awkwardly on it. And if that wasn't the case, maybe it was sore. He definitely injured it on an attempted spinning kick. A big boy like that, spinning kicks, lots of torque on your legs. Your Achilles isn't quite ready yet. And a big stout boy like that, he just wasn't able to put any weight on his foot from there. Kennedy knew it. His corner was calling it out. We all knew it. He took advantage of it and picked him apart probably after about a minute and a half of playing pitter-patter. And he finished it with a beautiful body shot, and Chris knew there wasn't much more to be done and kind of just let it happen. So it only took Kennedy 51 total and significant strikes. Chris landed 12 total and significant. He was 0 for 1 in takedown attempts. So Kennedy ends his 2-fight losing streak, starts a new winning streak in his return to the heavyweight division, and Chris starts a new losing streak. He is 1-2 since 2022. So what's next? Well, I don't expect to see Chris in the UFC much longer, to be honest. He's nearing 40, but he probably will get another fight. I think Walter Walker would be appropriate. And for Kennedy, I want to see him square up with Justin Tafa. But moving on, pretty solid fight here. We had Abus Magomedov with a round 3 submission via arm triangle choke over Bruno Ferreira. This was a fight I picked wrong, not super shocked. One of the first things I noticed, though, and the play-by-play team called it out, was how much bigger Abus looked than Bruno. He must be cutting pretty heavily. Bruno's not a tall, big frame for the division, but he's pretty shredded, lots of muscle mass. But Abus just made him look small in there. And, I expected this to be a very fast-paced brawl, but both men to start the fight were respecting each other's skills, their power, and they were a bit measured in the first round. I would say Abus was controlling the center of the octagon and landing more strikes and was chopping at that calf of Bruno pretty well. And Bruno was trying to find a way to close space against the longer and taller opponent. So not a lot of action round 1. Round 2, Abus was in control until Bruno landed a beautiful clean shot that almost finished Abus. And Abus was somehow able to get Bruno down to survive the round. And I think if Bruno was able to not get taken down and find a way to land some ground and pound, he was this close to a finish, which that's what I was predicting. But round 3, Magomedov was aggressive in his grappling. He was up 2 rounds, just kind of coasted to victory with that arm triangle. Ferreira was pretty gassed from defending the grappling throughout the fight. And Abus was able to take kind of slight work advantage there. Statistically, and you'll see, it started out pretty slow. It got finished in the third. There just wasn't a lot of volume. It seemed like Bruno was waiting for Abus to come forward most of the time. And Abus only landed 45 total strikes, 26 of them significant. He did get 4 takedowns in 8 attempts, so about 50%. He had a submission attempt and 3 minutes and 36 seconds of control time. Now, Bruno landed 36 total strikes, 29 of them significant with a submission attempt and a reversal. And Abus extends his winning streak to 2. He's 3-2 since 2022. Bruno ends his 2-fight winning streak and starts a new losing streak. He is 4-2 in the UFC. So where do these guys go next? I'd love to see Abus take on Joe Pyfer. Not sure if Joe wants to fight down, but I think that would be fantastic. A lot of guys in the division booked up. And for Bruno, how about the veteran Brad Tavares? Still in the prelims, 2 more in the prelims. We have Mateusz Renbecki with a split decision victory over Miktabik Oralbai. Fight of the night, 50 G's. And boy, was this an absolute slaughter fest. This is what you love to see. This was one of the highlights of this fantastic card in the prelims. And this was a fight I got wrong. This fight, Mateusz really was just brutally landing heavy hands all day long on Oralbai, which is funny because in his last fight, he got absolutely battered and beaten, and now he was able to give that to the younger Oralbai. And I'm not too sure why Oralbai just kind of let the kickboxing fight commence and not look to get takedowns and hold Rebecki down. I figured he'd do that immediately in the first round, do it early and often, and he was just willing to exchange. This again was completely opposite of Renbecki's last outing. And round 2, with all the big shots that Mateusz landed, Oralbai's eye was just completely destroyed. It looked like a broken orbital or something. It was swollen up so bad. But he finally got a takedown in round 2 with only a minute and a half left, but he still lost the round from just getting boxed up. And Mateusz was able to get back up and had his eye cut, which seemingly happened not from exchanges, but from a clash of heads before the takedown. So he's cut up, he's bleeding everywhere. Oralbai's face just looks like, mashed potatoes, and the swelling in that eye was pretty gnarly. But the officials almost called the fight off in round 2 and at the beginning of round 3 because of Oralbai's eye, but they let the carnage continue. There was the Johnny Walker incident where they asked him where he was, and he said the desert, and they called it off. Here in this instant, probably a debatable stoppage, and they let the fight continue. But I was all about it. I was all for it. This fight was insane. And what was more insane is that Miktabik was down 2 rounds, needed a finish in the 3rd round, and was just swinging from the start. Rebecki clipped him, knocked him down. It looked like he was going to be completely out. And I would have called the fight if I was the ref. But they let them continue. They let this fight just commence, man. And 4 minutes in round 3, after being slaughtered most of the fight, Miktabik somehow survived, man. The heart, the grit. He was exhausted on his back, but somehow survived through it. Got up, tried to offensively grapple himself. Just the determination was on full display. They finished the round in just a nasty, bloody scramble. Again, just a really crazy showcase of heart, toughness, and determination. That's what the sport's all about. And I think majority of the fighters in this division on the roster would have broken or would have been finished, especially with that shot in the 3rd round, but probably wouldn't have made it that far. And it was just very inspiring and one hell of a display, although it was pretty lopsided. And the stats make it look a little closer than it was, but Mateusz landed 93 total strikes, 71 significant. He got 3 takedowns in 4 attempts. Damn near, if he wanted it, he got it. Who would have thought against Miktabik that would have been the case? He also got the knockdown in 2 minutes and 24 seconds of control time. And Miktabik landed 85 total strikes, so only 8 less, 61 significant, 10 less. And then he had 2 takedowns and 5 attempts, so less than 50%. Credit Renbecki here. And then Miktabik also had a reversal in 2 minutes and 5 seconds of control time himself. So Mateusz starts a new winning streak. He is an impressive 5-1 in the UFC. And Miktabek, and also you just got to say, what a rebound. You know, less than a year, less than 6 months from getting completely dominated, comes out and puts on a display like that. Great teamwork, great coaching, great way to just be able to move on and erase that from your memory. In the world of fighting, it's not that easy when you could stew 6 months on how that fight was, looking at tape, so on and so forth. But Miktabek ends that 8-fight winning streak, starts a new losing streak, and is now 2-1 in his young UFC career. He's still only like 26. So I would love to see Mateusz in another banger. Give me Matt Frevola, Mateusz Ronbecki. Come on now. And for Miktabek, he can match up with Guram Kutateladze. Either way, both fights absolutely bonkers. Moving on to the prelim headliner. Again, this was probably the biggest downfall of the card. Jeff Neal with a round 1 TKO over Rafael Dos Anjos. And, Jeff was coming hot out the gates. RDA was definitely on defense, trying to move. But a weird situation happened. It's just some weird torque. He must have injured it before or something. But just blew out his knee, wrapped up. That was it. And only took Jeff 21 total, 18 significant strikes. Again, he was very aggressive out the gates. Technically got that knockdown and takedown, although that was because of the knee. And then RDA only got 4 total and significant strikes off. So Jeff was being aggressive. Would have been interesting as more minutes went by. But you hate to see that, especially at his age. And he wants to continue fighting. What a legend RDA is. So Jeff ends his 2-fight losing streak, starts a new winning streak, although it was an injury TKO. He's 2-2 since 2022, stays at 10 in the rankings. RDA extends his losing streak to 3, but again, he says he wants to come back. He doesn't want to go out like that, and I don't really blame him. Seems like he loves the game still. So what's next? Well, RDA is going to be out for quite some time, so I'm not going to match him up. And for Jeff Neal, I like the idea of him fighting Joaquin Buckley, but Ian Gary got that announced since I had put this on there. So let's look at the rankings here. Who could Jeff Neal fight? So he's number 10. Has he fought Gilbert Burns? He has not fought Gilbert Burns. That might be an ideal fight. Gilbert coming off some skids, winnable fight. Big opportunity for Jeff. Let's make that happen. But let's kick off this beautiful, beautiful main card. We had Shara Magomedov with a round 2 knockout over Armen Petrosian. Performance of the night, 50 G's for the Pirate. And he killed it on the mic post-fight as well. But this fight, as expected and how I called out last week, very, very high-paced and fun kickboxing showdown. I think until Armen got caught with probably one of the more insane knockout finishes I've ever seen. He was owning the fight because he was pressuring Shara, caught him with the big body shot in the first, went to clinch in, wasn't very aggressive from there in trying to get the finish, which I thought he should have. He should have attacked that body, went in and kind of gone for the kill. But Shara does have a lot of weapons. I guess that opens you up for the chance of getting finished. But the rest of the round, both men just beating the hell out of each other's leg, kickboxing. You give me one, I'll give you one back. Armen definitely was in control, landed more volume to win the round. And then round 2, it was just another complete kickboxing masterclass by both men. Again, Armen was leading the dance. Shara was trying to counter as best he could, but he got a chance to get him with a freaking double spinning back fist. Boom, one got blocked, came back quick, completely destroyed him. I mean, to think about what it takes to train to even think about that moment in a fight. If you guys have ever performed in a sport of the highest display, no matter how many hours, how many reps, you go in, you're in front of a crowd, especially an individual sport like this. Like I relate to high school wrestling and the crowds weren't that big compared to this. I mean, you completely almost black out there. We're talking like 13 minutes into a fight with the volume they had. These guys' stamina, if you're playing like UFC, full bars here, it was like really low. Has the audacity to pull off a fucking stubble spinning back fist. Shit was insane. But he called it the double bullet. He said, I'm trademarking that. And that was with the 10-second clapper going off. So 10 seconds left, pulls off the double bullet, walk-off knockout. The Pirates coming for the gold. I'm coming for everything. He said some shit like that. What a character, the one-eyed bandit, man. Statistically, he landed 67 total strikes, 65 of them significant with a knockdown. And Arman landed 77 total and significant. So, Shara, another undefeated fighter, keeping a 0, extending his winning streak to 15, 4-0 in the UFC. He enters the top 15 at 14. Now, Arman extends his losing streak to 2. He's an even 3-3 since 2022. So what's next? Well, Shara is continuing to climb up the division. He's a very marketable guy. He says he wants to stay active. Give him Junyon Park. Jun's going to be down. He's going to show him what the top 15 life is all about. And for Arman, how about a fun showdown with another good fighter, Christian Leroy Duncan? The striking there would be absolutely brilliant. But that was another fight I got wrong. Speaking of getting fights wrong, I picked a dog here, and he was one hell of a dog. Very close, but didn't get the dub. We had Lerone Murphy with a unanimous decision over Dan Ige. And this was just another absolute beautiful scrap. This one was to continue a really amazing main card and set up for the big dogs. But round one was absolutely savage. Dan, had come in early into Lerone's face and wanted to show him what his power could do. And Lerone honestly was like, oh, damn. And he was on skates until Dan got a big double, like a blast double leg takedown. Murphy was able to get back up, impressive feat there. But really was landing good shots until Dan caught him with a check left hook. So he got up, landed some good shots. Dan, boom, check left hook, sat his ass down to win the first round. Again, really went for the finish here, unlike Arman, and probably tired himself out, which didn't set him up well for the end of the fight. So I say Arman should have went for it. You never know. Something like this could happen because Dan smelled blood in the water. He wanted that finish. A round one finish of an undefeated Lerone Murphy. This is your career trajectory at the back half of your prime. Now he's just kind of the gatekeeper. I don't blame him. Plus he's in Abu Dhabi. Why the hell not? But round two, both men were measured, patient. Again, a very chaotic first round. I would say Lerone was landing good strikes at distance, and Dan tried to get another takedown with about 2 minutes left. But Murphy was prepared this time and actually out-grappled Ige in the clinch and got his own takedown. A tight round there, but I would say Murphy wins it with volume. So now we're at 1-1 going into a winner takes all 3 round. I love fights like this. I was so hyped for this. But round 3, Dan seemed pretty damn tired. He was doing well after doing some wrestling and scrambling with Lerone. But with about 2 minutes left, it seemed like Dan was going to get the win with the wrestling and scrambling. He just didn't land any offense when he had the control. And Lerone got control with about a minute left. And just the last 20 seconds let his hands fly. And I honestly think that last 20 seconds was the difference to the fight and the round. That's about as damn near close as it gets. But what a beautiful way to fight adversity for Lerone. Almost getting finished in the first. Out cardio and Dan Ige. Guy's a stud. So Lerone landed 78 total strikes, 52 of them significant. He had 3 takedowns of his own in 5 attempts and 2 minutes and 17 seconds of control time. Dan landed 52 total strikes, 46 of them significant. So he had about 26 less total, 6 less significant. And then he had 1 takedown and 3 attempts, so wasn't quite as successful in the grappling either. But he did have 2 reversals, that knockdown, and almost a full round of control at 4 minutes and 47 seconds of control time. So again, a lot of zeros were defended this Saturday. Lerone stays undefeated, now at a 15-fight winning streak. Golly! 7-0-1 in the UFC. He moves up only one spot in the rankings to number 11. And Dan extends his losing streak to 2. He drops to 3-4 since 2022. He has been active, but he stays at 14. So where do these gents go next? I would love to see Liron fight Josh Emmett. He even mentioned that on the Ariel Helwani show. That's the fight to make next. And for Dan, how about Sadiq Youssef? Not a lack of matchups for these two, and if you put them in a fight, it's usually going to be a good one. Then we had the big three, and golly, were these a lot of fun. We had Magomed Ankalaev with a unanimous decision over Alexander Rakic. This was one of the fights I got right. And this was just about Magomed controlling the center of the octagon, as Rakic was just kind of on his bike, circling and moving and staying out of range the entire fight, because Ankalaev showed that he has different power than Alexander, which actually caught me by surprise. I didn't think he was going to have that much more of a power advantage. And he was just defensive heavy, but landed good leg kicks, tried to survive, and round 2 was much of the same. But Ankalaev was picking up the momentum, just outboxing and outclassing Rakic, and landing the bigger shots. And after about 10 minutes of being on your bike, circling, moving, staying defensive, Alexander actually looked like he was starting to tire from all that circling and movement. And I was just surprised Alexander wasn't more offensive, and he kind of just accepted being down 2 rounds. And Magomed, even more surprising, didn't look for takedowns. He just wanted to kickbox and beat the shit out of Rakic to prove to the UFC brass he deserves the title fight. And I thought Rakic would do a lot better on the feet. So, Rakic has been recovered from injuries for a while. He did get a little overzealous and get knocked out against Yuri Prochazka. He's fighting championship potential. So I don't know if he's losing his confidence or what. But you're down 2 rounds. You're fighting a guy that you win, you get into the title. I expected a lot more offensive output, and especially late in the fight, go out and try to get it. But you might just have to see that Magomed Ankalaev is that fucking good. But round 3, Magomed just completely stalked down Rakic again and total control of the fight. He even turned Alexander into a grappler, which isn't necessarily his strong suit, with about 2 minutes left in round 3. So again, he just absolutely broke down Alexander Rakic, where he was just trying to get out of the round and grapple away, being down 2 rounds. So he didn't go for it. Again, with some of those recent losses of Rakic, I expected a lot more from him, but you have to give credit to Ankalaev. He's just that good and absolutely neutralized the very strong and powerful Alexander Rakic. So, statistically, Magomed landed 75 total strikes, 55 of them significant. He had 1 minute and 31 seconds of control time. And Alexander landed 59 total, 53 significant. So about 20 less in total volume, 2 less significant. He was 0 for 1 in takedown attempts and had 1 minute of control time. That was all clinch stuff between both men. Magomed cannot be denied. He extends his winning streak to 11. He did have a no contest and draw in there. And Alexander extends his losing streak to 3. Ankalaev stays at the number 1 contender and Rakic at number 5. I absolutely, I thought Magomed has earned it already, but he deserves the title shot against Alex Pereira. And for Alexander, I think maybe the winner of Nikita Krylov and Azamat Murzakanov would be appropriate. A guy that's kind of moving up, and you have to defend your spot in the rankings or get down. Amazing performance by Ankalaev. It's been a long couple weeks with the moving. Needed to have some grapes, you know what I'm saying? With that said, you want to talk about amazing performances. We had Khamzat Chimaev. I smash anybody! With a round 1 submission via face crank over Robert Whittaker. Performance of the night, 50 G's for Chimaev. And the story for this fight was all about Rob getting out of round 1. I thought he would, and I thought he would go on and win the fight. He didn't get out of round 1, though. He spent majority of the round defending a takedown attempt up against the cage, avoiding submission attempts, trying to get into round 2 until he couldn't due to an absolute nasty jaw injury. Watching the fight real time, it was basically 3 minutes of him kind of having a hip up against the cage so Khamzat couldn't get in control. Finally wore on him with about a minute-ish left. It seemed like Robert could just last till the bell. And he didn't even have a rear naked choke under the chin. It was just a face crank smash in his face. I guess Robert already had suffered some sort of jaw injury here. But basically, Khamzat, with his elbow and that choke sitting perfectly on the chin, smashed his jaw inward where he broke this bone. And his teeth went from here to like laying flat on the bottom of his mouth. So he completely inverted his teeth. Absolutely nasty injury. I mean, that's not going to be fun. I don't even know what the recovery looks like that. If it'd be worse than a broken jaw, which is this backbone, which is still a jaw wired shut thing. I have no idea what that means, but it was just a weird tappage. I was like, he had to have broken his jaw. Rob's not a guy just to tap, and that's exactly what happened. I really wish that didn't happen. We saw rounds 2 and 3, man. That would have been the true measuring stick for Chimaev. We didn't get to see it. I'm super bummed about it. But you have to give props to where they're due. Robert Whittaker even gave Khamzat his flowers. He did that to a former champion with multiple title defenses. This guy is an absolute problem. And he was looking massive. Seemed like he struggled with the weight cut. Some sketchy weight cut stuff going on with extended time. Waited to the very last second. How in the hell did he make the lower weight class? Blows my mind in welterweight. But this guy is scary, man. So Robert only landed 2 total insignificant strikes. Khamzat landed 25 total, 3 significant with 2 takedowns and 4 attempts. So about 50%. He had a submission attempt in 3 minutes and 20 seconds of control time. And again, I said, Khamzat's going to go and bet on himself. He could get the finish in round 1. And that's exactly what happened, man. Another 0 defended. Stays undefeated on a 14-fight winning streak. 4-0 since 2022. He moves up 10 spots in the rankings to number 3. And Robert ends his 2-fight winning streak. Starts a new losing streak. He moves down 1 spot in the rankings to number 4. I really do think this performance has stamped Khamzat's path to a title shot against DDP and leapfrogging Sean Strickland, who already fought DDP. I feel like the UFC has been wanting to fast-track Khamzat to the title with the health issues, visa issues, all the issues. Might as well take advantage of the window while it's open. And I'd rather see that fight personally. And for Robert, I'm assuming he'll be out for quite some time. Maybe in his return, he fights somebody like Kayao Baralho. Brutal loss for Rob. Massive performance by Khamzat Chimaev. But this night was all about the champion and still Ilia Topuria with a round 3 knockout over Max Holloway. Yes, I said knockout. The first person to ever knock out or knock down Max Holloway. And of course, that was a performance of the night. Extra 50 G's for the champ. And I honestly feel like Max was outboxing Ilia as the fight was going on, but he was throughout majority of the fight. He was mixing in his speed, his movement, the brilliant jab that he had working all night. And this is exactly how I thought it would play out. But Ilia stuck to his game plan. He wasn't too worried. He was just kind of flowing and waiting for a moment to showcase his power. You know, he didn't wait to just throw this strike in the 3rd round. He had thrown some, landed some, but he was really waiting for the timing and things to open where he could cut off the cage and get Max up against the cage. And he did that just like he did against Volkanovski. And he is the first person to finish Max in his pro career. I mean, the accolades this guy has to come into the division, get a pretty early title fight against Volkanovski, knock out Volk, knock out Max. That's about as good as it can get as a young fighter. And in the first round, Ilia got Max down. That was the big thing I wanted to see. Is Ilia going to resort to grappling? And can he hang with the striking? Well, Max, as he typically does, was able to get back up to his feet fairly quickly. And Max was able to return a bunch of nice combinations. But Ilia was landing leg kicks throughout the fight. He wasn't resorting to grappling. And Max led the dance throughout majority of round 2, even early in round 3. but Ilya was landing a fair share of significant strikes at that moment. But round 3, early in the round, Ilya just rocked Max, pounced on him, landed another huge left, and got the job done. That left hand of Ilya Topuria, that's like some Alex Pereira type shit. This kid is an absolute problem. Statistically, Ilya landed 78 total strikes, 75 of them significant. He had 2 takedowns and a knockdown. Max landed 84 total, 79 of them significant. So he landed 6 less than Max, 4 less significant, but he landed a good amount, probably 15 to 20 after rocking Max. So Ilya, again, another undefeated, keeping a 0, extending his winning streak to 16, 5-0 in the UFC. Woo-wee! 5-0 since 2022, I mean, not in the UFC. Max ends his 3-fight winning streak, starts a new losing streak. He announced that he is going to permanently move up to the lightweight division, but he is at number 2 in the featherweight division. So what's next? Well, it seems like everything's pointing to Ilya and Volk 2. They had Volk in the octagon afterwards. He kind of gave him the respect and flowers. Ilya, you got to give him credit. Very respectful, a true student of the sport and pays his respects where they're due. And for Max, if he is going up to the lightweight, let's just make this happen. Give me Max Holloway and Dustin Poirier in a rematch. Come on. Hallelujah. Ilya Topuria, Khamzat Chimaev, Magomed Ankalaev, Shara, the Bullet Magomedov with the double bullet, Lerone Murphy. What a class of display in this main card. And a lot of undefeated fighters really making moves. Again, a 9 out of 10 card. Absolutely bonkers. Helped me get through my move on Saturday. But speaking about this Saturday, we got that UFC Fight Night Edmonton. Canada's always a good time. All happening on ESPN Plus with football season. Probably not getting primetime TV. I'm really bummed that this card lost the Derek Lewis fight. But I will say that the prelims have some intriguing matched fights. Like evenly matched fights. The main card isn't great without the Lewis fight, but the co-main and the main are exciting. I'm giving this a 6 out of 10 on my preview. And some good fights that we will not break down. We have Contender Series alum Kyle Machado taking on Brenson Ribeiro. They're squaring off in the light heavyweight division. We're going to kick this sucker off in the prelims. We have Cody the Renegade Gibson, 37 years old with a 21-10 record, taking on Chad the Monster Enelger, 37 years old with a 13-7 record. Now this fight is a showcase between two men who've been counted out, have had an up and down pro career, but getting a win here puts them in a solid spot where a loss really derails your career and puts you kind of in a purgatory position. Probably even more so for Chad oh my God, how do you say that name? Aneliger? Chad Aneliger? I want to make sure I spelled that right. Chad Aneliger. Regardless, puts you in a bad spot, especially for Chad. Usually that puts fights in fun positions where it delivers. Well, here we had Cody. He has a brown belt in BJJ. He's an Ultimate Fighter, LFA, Titan FC, and two-time UFC alum, although he's only 37. He's on a one-fight winning streak, 2-3 since 2022, 1-2 in his UFC return. 7 of his 20 wins are via knockout, 5 via submission. So 12 of his 20 wins come via finish, and 4 of his 10 losses are via submission. He does have some reach advantages. He has a 6.5-inch reach advantage and a 4-inch leg reach advantage. Now, Chad is a Contender Series alum. He's on a one-fight winning streak and is 3-2 in the UFC. 7 of his 13 wins are via knockout, and 6 of his 7 losses are also via submission. Both these guys taking some L's via submissions. Now, again, this should be a fun brawl between two men. I expect it to be back and forth. Probably go a little bit everywhere. Cody probably initiating the grappling. and should be fun to watch. I do believe Cody's the better striker. He's going to be able to put his length to his advantage. And Cody, he has fought stiffer competition. He's more experienced. I do expect that to pay dividends here. Chad has good power. He's been around. You have to watch out for him. But I'm taking Cody Gibson. We are putting him on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Got to get the wins back up on track from that 5-7 308 card. Abu Dhabi always gives me. I'm always picking the dogs. You always get these young up and coming dudes, and they always prove me wrong. Or these foreign dudes. Next up, we got Garrett Armfield, 28 years old with a 10-4 record, taking on Sergey Sidi, 28 years old as well with a 10-2 record. Now, this is another fight that should be a fun, high-paced brawl. Both men looking to get some momentum going in their careers in the UFC. They're nearing their prime at 28 years old and just have a big task of kind of trying to survive this very brutal bantamweight division. Even these two are ranked in like the 20 to 30 range. Very good skill level here. Breaking it down, Garrett is an LFA and Cage Fury alum. He's on a 1-fight losing streak, 3-2 since 2022, but 2-2 in the UFC. 6 of his 10 wins are via knockout. 3 of his 4 losses are via submission. Now, Sergey is on a 1-fight losing streak. He's 1-1 in the UFC, 4-1 since 2022. He's a Contender Series alum, and 7 of his 10 wins are via knockout. Now, Garrett has had some moments. He's shown the ability to be able to strike and grapple, and I was really impressed in his win over Brad Katona, but Brady Highstand showcased off some of his vulnerabilities, but Sergey isn't going to grapple. He's going to look to kickbox in this fight. I do feel like Armfield has more experience. He's going to be able to mix in his grappling to steal rounds and win this fight. For that reason, I'm taking Garrett Armfield. We are putting him on that parlay. He's an underdog coming to eat. Ho, ho. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on. We have Rodrigo Z. Colmia Nascimento, 31 years old with a 11-2-2 record and the number 15 next to his name, taking on Alexander King Kong Romanov, 33 years old with a 17-3 record and the number 13 next to his name. Now we get 2 men in their primes in the heavyweight division who are just battling it out, trying to stay in the top 15. Take advantage of their prime window, so a win now is really needed. Both men lately have suffered tough losses, but have shown they can compete at the top level. Both grapple well for heavyweights as well, so I'm sure we will see plenty of that. Breaking it down, Rodrigo trains out of American Top Team. He has a purple belt in BJJ. He's a Contender Series alum. He's on a 1-fight losing streak and is 3-1 since 2022. 6 of his 11 wins are via submission. Both of his losses are via knockout. And he is rocking a 5-inch reach advantage. Now, Alexander has a wrestling style. He's an Eagles FC alum and former champion. He's on a 1-fight losing streak, 2-3 since 2022. 6 of his 17 wins are via knockout, 9 via submission, so 16 of his 17 wins come via finish. Now, Romanov, he's been a little sketchy lately. He doesn't seem to be super dedicated, hasn't come in shape. He gained a bunch of weight, which is why he has back-to-back losses in the first round. Now, Rodrigo was kind of memed by Derek Lewis. I got to see that in person. But he's looked good in some very close decision victories and doesn't have a finish since May of 2020. So I do think this is potentially his opportunity. This is a very close fight, 13 versus 15. I'm taking Rodrigo Nascimento, but avoiding this on any parlays where possible. It's really a coin flip. Moving on, we have Jack Tank Shore, 29 years old with a 17-2 record, taking on Yusuf the Moroccan Devil Zalal, 28 years old with a 15-5-1 record. I am absolutely pumped for this matchup. Both men uber talented, and for Zalal, he's full of confidence right now. Jack's definitely faced stiffer competition and has been tested in the featherweight division since he moved up from bantamweight when he was undefeated. This fight really is a 50-50 fight. I could see it going either way. Breaking it down, Jack has a black belt in BJJ. He's a Cage Warriors alum and former champion with 1 successful title defense. He's on a 1-fight losing streak and is 2-2 since 2022, and 9 of his 17 wins are via submission. Yusuf, he's an orthodox fighter. He trains at a Factory X. He has a brown belt in BJJ. He's an LFA and UFC 2-time alum. He's on a 5-fight winning streak. He had a draw and was 2-0 in his UFC return. 8 of his 15 wins are via knockout. I really don't know who's going to be the better striker here. I think people overlook what Jack Shore is capable of. But I do think Zalal will have the speed and creativity advantage. I do think Jack's going to have more of the technical boxing, maybe better MMA grappling in my opinion as well. But if Jack could have success mixing it up, I do see him winning. But Zalal is going to give him all he can handle. Zalal's coming off back-to-back rear naked choke wins. I highly doubt he does that against Jack Shore. You never know. I'm not putting this on a parlay. This is another coin flip fight, but I'm taking Jack Shore. And then we have a few more prelim fights. Thought that was for the main card. I was wrong. All right. We have Charles Air Jourdain, 28 years old with a 15-8-1 record, taking on Victor La Mangosta Henry, 37 years old with a 24-6 record. Now, before Charles gets into his prime window, he's only 28, he's transitioned down a weight class to bantamweight from featherweight, which I think was a really good move. And I'm excited to see, there's a lot of things to see with him in his first bantamweight fight, but I think it'll be good because he's definitely seemed undersized at featherweight, especially in that last fight. What's the fighting nerd guy's name? Gene Silva. But he's facing a tough veteran here who's looked solid lately and is looking to get a big name on his resume. A nice win against the Air Jourdain box. But breaking it down, Charles has a black belt in BJJ. He's on a 2-fight losing streak, 3-4 since 2022. 8 of his 15 wins are via knockout, 5 via submission, so 13 of his 15 wins via finish. He loves to get those finishes. Victor is a King of the Cage and Risen alum. He's on a 2-fight winning streak. He had a no contest as well. He's 3-1-1 since 2022. 8 of his 24 wins are via submission, 7 via knockout, so 15 of 24 via finish. Now, Victor is well-rounded. I'm sure he's going to test Charles' grappling ability, see how he could handle it in the bantamweight division, and see if he can wear him out, especially with a bigger weight cut. Charles is struggling in the grappling department, but I do expect him to be the faster, better, and more creative striker to be able to use that movement and showcase his skill to avoid the takedowns enough to control the fight. Will he avoid all the takedowns? Probably not, but I think he does enough, finds a way to win. For that reason, I'm taking Charles Jourdain. We are putting him on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on. We got Ariane, the Queen of Violence da Silva, 17-9 with the number 13 next to her name, taking on Jasmine Jazdavicius, 35 years old with an 11-3 record and the number 14 next to her name. Now, Jasmine has been on fire. She has absolutely delivered in front of the Canadian fan base on every time she fights on home soil. But this fight is another crack for her against higher level competition, and Ariane is going to make this one hell of a scrap. Breaking it down, Ariane has a Muay Thai style. She trains with Amanda Nunez at the Lioness Studio. She has a black belt in Muay Thai and a purple belt in BJJ. She is a KSW alum and former champion with 2 successful title defenses. She had the 2020 submission of the year against Luana Carolina. She's on a 1-fight losing streak, but is 3-2 since 2022. 6 of her 17 wins are via knockout. 4 of her 9 losses are also via knockout. So to knock out or be knocked out. Now, Jasmine trains out of Niagara Top Team. She has a brown belt in BJJ. She's a Cage Fury and Contender Series alum. She's on a 2-fight winning streak, 5-2 since 2022. She has the largest total strike differential in a UFC women's bout at 326-26, which was against Priscilla Kohara. But honestly, Jasmine, she's a dog. She makes all of her fights a dog fight. She's going to make Silva work for it. I do believe Silva's the better striker, and I expect Ariane to control the fight unless Jasmine could get multiple takedowns and control Silva there, which is very possible. But I am taking Ariane to Silva. I am not putting this on any parlays. This is a very close fight. Moving on, still in the prelims, we have Ayman Zahabi, 36 years old with an 11-2 record, taking on Pedro the Young Punisher Munoz, 38 years old with a 20-9 record. Now, this veteran showdown will be a great scrap. There's a lot on the line for both men if they want to continue to fight in the UFC, let alone fight quality wins and stiff competition. Quality fighters. Ayman hasn't been very active in the UFC. He is coming off some quality wins, including his last fight where he gave Javid Basharat his first L. And Pedro, he really hasn't had much going of late, but he showed he's still capable against Chris Gutierrez last year, who's an up-and-comer in the division. Breaking this down, Ayman trains out of TriStar. He has a black belt in BJJ. He's on a 4-fight winning streak, 3-0 since 2022. 6 of his 11 wins are via knockout, and he does have a 4-inch reach advantage. Now, Pedro trains out of American Top Team. He has a black belt in BJJ, a brown belt in Judo. He's a Jungle Fight and RFA alum, former RFA champion. He's tied with Marlon Vera for the most bouts in UFC Bantamweight division history at 21. He has the most decision bouts in UFC Bantamweight division history at 13. He has the most significant strikes landed in Bantamweight division history at 1,263. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. He's won 2-1 since 2022. 8 of his 20 wins are via submission, 5 via knockout, so 13 of 20 via finish. Now, Pedro's solid everywhere. I do think right now Ayman is the quicker and more powerful striker, and with the size, he might even have the grappling advantage. Both men should deliver a very high volume of leg kicks. I'm just going to go with Zahabi in a back-and-forth striking showdown. I am putting Ayman on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. So in the prelims, I have Canada going 0-1. 1-1, 2-1. Nope. 1-1, 1-2, 2-2. 2-2 in the prelims. Moving on to the main card, we have Mike Proper Malott, 32 years old with a 10-2-1 record, taking on Trevin Giles, 32 years old with a 16-6 record. Now, this is Mike's redemption opportunity back in Canada. This time, he isn't facing a savvy veteran like Neil Magny, but Trevin is in his prime at 32, and he needs a win as well. So he's going to be aggressive and looking to shock the world here. Breaking it down, Mike has a black belt in BJJ. He's kind of Captain Canada. 2 of his last 3 fights have been performance of the night. He's showing up, he's showing out. He's on a 1-fight losing streak and is 3-1 since 2022. He's a World Series of Fighting, Bellator, Cage Fury, and Contender Series alum. 6 of his 10 wins are via submission, 4 via knockout, so all 10 via finish. And both of his losses come via knockout. Now, Trevin has a brown belt in BJJ. He's a Legacy FC, RFA and LFA alum. He's on a 2-fight losing streak, 2-3 since 2022. 6 of his 16 wins are via knockout, 5 via submission, so 11 of his 16 fights via finish. 3 of his 6 losses via knockout, 3 via submission. So he's been finished, and he does finish. I do think Mike, though, has an overall higher ceiling. He's a little bit more versatile with his options to win, but Trevin's tough, man. He's going to go for broke here. He has very crisp striking and boxing, and I'm sure he's going to have his chances. As long as Mike doesn't gas himself out and try to blitz him like he did Neil Magny, I expect him to find a way to win this fight, have the Canadian crowd absolutely going bonkers. I'm predicting them at 3-2 at this point. For that reason, I'm taking Mike Malott. I am putting him on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on. I don't think Canada has so much success here. We have Marc-Andre Powerbar Barrio, 34 years old with a 16-7 record, taking on Dustin Stoltzfus, 32 years old with a 15-6 record. Now, this is a fun matchup as both men have been humbled by the top of the division. They're looking to right the ship a little bit. Mark and Dustin have similar styles, but I actually favor Dustin's striking ability. Mark is going to look to exhaust Dustin, but Stoltzfus has really good cardio as well. Breaking this down, Mark trains out of Killcliff FC. He has a blue belt in BJJ. He's on a 2-fight losing streak and is 3-4 since 2022. 10 of his 16 wins come via knockout. Now, Dustin has a purple belt in BJJ, a red belt in Tang Soo Do, and a black belt in Luta Livre. He's a Contender Series alum. He's on a 1-fight losing streak and is 2-2 since 2022. And 6 of his 15 wins come via submission. Both men here are aggressive, and they like to put a pace on their opponents, but they aren't the most technical fighters. I favor Dustin's power. I think he can match the pace with Mark that he's going to try to put on. I do think he edges out a close one, so I am taking Dustin Stoltzfus. We are putting him on that parlay. We marking it down, and we getting that bread. So I have Canada going 3-3. Moving on to the co-main. My lady Rose Thug Namajunas, 32 years old with a 14-6 record and the number 5 next to her name, taking on Erin Cold-Blooded Blanchfield, 12-2, 25 years old and the number 3 next to her name. There's a 7-year age difference here. Erin Blanchfield is great. I may be a little biased as Rose has been my favorite women's fighter since women's MMA has started. I guess I was going for Miesha Tate before, there was a bunch of divisions. But Erin really showed where she's at in her first crack at the cream of the crop of the division. And Manon Fiorot just absolutely humbled her. Rose's first fight in the flyweight division was against Fiorot as well. And she battled, even though she had a really mangled finger in her hand and was pretty much compromised through the entire fight. Erin's very young, again at 25. And although her grappling has led her to success, I don't think she's going to have that success against Rose, the former strawweight champion. And this honestly should be a title eliminator fight, so a ton is on the line. Breaking this one down, Rose has a black belt in Taekwondo, Karate, and a brown belt in BJJ. She's an Invicta and Ultimate Fighter alum. She's the former strawweight champion with 2 successful title defenses and 2 separate title reigns. In 2018 and 2021, she was the female MMA Fighter of the Year. She's the first woman in UFC to regain a championship title after losing it. And she holds victories over 3 former UFC women's strawweight champions and Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Jessica Andrade, and Zhang Weili. She had the 2013 Submission of the Year in Invicta against Kathina Catron, in 2015 against Paige Van Sant, and in 2017 against Michelle Watterson. 5 of her 13 wins are via submission. She's on a 2-fight winning streak, 2-2 since 2022, and 2-1 in the flyweight division. She does have a 3.5-inch leg reach advantage. And I will admit, I don't love that she's in the flyweight division. She seems undersized. Now, Erin has a BJJ style. She's got a black belt in BJJ. She's a Cage Fury and Invicta alum. She's on a 1-fight losing streak, but is 4-1 since 2022. And 4 of her 12 wins are via submission. I really think Rose is going to outclass and outstrike Erin in this fight. I really think Erin's only path to victory is to take Rose down early and often and be able to hold her there. I'm not betting on that because Rose has great offensive grappling herself and takedown defense. And Erin has showcased her toughness, especially in that Furrow fight. She's got the ability to dig deep in a 5-round fight. But Rose is just too good for her right now in her younger years. For that reason, I'm taking Rose Namajunas. We are putting her on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on. We have Amir, the Prince Albazi. 31 years old with a 17-1 record and the number 3 next to his name. Taking on Brandon, the Assassin Baby Moreno. 30 years old with a 21-8-2 record and the number 2 next to his name. I still don't understand why he went with the Assassin Baby. I think because he was Babyface Moreno for a while. I like the Assassin more, but it is what it is. It's great to see Brandon Moreno back in the octagon. One of the most fucking fantastic fighters to watch stylistically in the flyweight division of all time. But much like the co-main event, the path to victory for Albazi is going to be grappling early and often. He's showcased the ability to do that over the course of 5 rounds. He's facing his stiffest competition yet in the former champion, who is looking to get back on track after dropping 2 split decision losses. Now, Moreno has been one of the more exciting and consistent champs in all of UFC, but after taking time off, he said he was a little burnt out. He wanted to be out of the limelight. I honestly don't know where his head's at, and that's concerning in a fight to be killed or kill or be killed. Breaking this down, Amir trains out of Extreme Couture. He has a purple belt in BJJ. He's a Bellator and Brave alum. He's on a 6-fight winning streak, 5-0 in the UFC. 9 of his 17 wins are via submission. Now, Brandon trains out of Fortis MMA. He has a black belt in BJJ. He's the former flyweight champion 2 times and an interim champ. 5 of his last 7 fights have been fight of the night or performance of the night. He absolutely shows up and shows out. He had the 2021 submission of the year against Davis and Figueiredo in their second fight, and he was the 2021 Breakthrough Fighter of the Year. He's an LFA alum and former champ. He's on a 2-fight losing streak and is 2-3 since 2022. 11 of his 21 wins are via submission. Now, Brandon is an absolute blast to watch. He is very skilled. He's good everywhere. But the one struggle he has had is against really good grappling with the likes of Pantoja. And I do think Amir is going to present a lot of the same. Amir has had a pretty serious injury, and that could play dividends here, but he has been out for some time, so I'm just going to assume that that's nothing to worry about. Moreno has offensive grappling and amazing scrambling ability. I think a lot of the flyweights do. But Albazi's top control really seems to be smothering. I expect that to be the difference in this fight. Brandon may have the striking advantage, so if he could tire Amir out by defending takedowns and getting this fight deep into the 5-round affair, I could see him outpointing Albazi. I'm not betting against the grappling ability here. I have a lot in the past few cards, and the grapplers have won. For that reason, I'm taking the Prince Amir Albazi, but I am not putting this on a parlay. A lot of this is on the hinge of Brandon. Who knows where he's at mentally and how seriously he's taking this anymore. Which is sad because he's still young. Lots of good years left. But hey, Canada getting some action. I think Canada goes about 500. Rose Namajunas. You get to see Brandon Moreno back. Mike Malott. Jasmine Jazdavicius. Ayman Zahabi. They always show out. It's always a good time. Next week, we're back to the Apex. UFC Fight Night Vegas 100. It's a decent but not deep card. It's honestly like the most apex of all apex cards for their 100th apex card. It's headlined by the veteran Neil Magny and Fight Nerds Carlos Prates. But that's episode 72. I'm your host, Shane Gillette. See you next week.